We're talking about asking God questions, a lot of questions.
A lot of questions.
And a lot of answered ones and a lot of unanswered ones.
Yes.
Is there a difference between questioning God and asking God questions?
I do believe so. And I would say that I have, based on the research that I've done, come up with a couple of loose conclusions. That's the nature of doing anything that revolves around questions, is that at the end of it, there's still the question.
More questions.
But I wanted to know that too.
Yeah.
Because his way, I can't wait for some women to sort of crawl into the whole concept and see it come to life, because what you're going to see is that it was his way. It was the way of Jesus to ask questions and then to respond to their questions. But there are times, and there are certainly times in the Old Testament, when God reacts strongly to being questioned, and Jesus did the same thing. But I looked at everyone. Listen, you know that you are a research nut when you find a way to check on every single question you can find in the scriptures. And then every single one of them that God or Jesus asks, you pour over and over and over and over. Then every single time the word question comes up, I've looked at all of those, when it says, why do you question me in your mind? And I think a couple of different things. I think that in questioning his goodness, his integrity, that there is blatant unbelief. But I would also like to say that even those people lived through it. There were times that he called out the disciples on their unbelief, but they survived it.
Yes.
God turned around and said to Job, brace yourself. And after you have brought all these questions, now brace yourself, because I'm about to ask you some. But Job actually did survive it. But where Jesus comes down hard on it is when the teachers of the law were trying to trap him in questions. To prove him evil. And I think that's the difference. One of the things that I share with the women going through the series is that anytime there is a sincere search, ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. Even when our questions are, Lord, how could you let this happen? How could you let this happen? Jesus himself, Lord, Father, why? Why have you forsaken me? He asked a question from the cross, and he could not have been more obedient and without sin. I think that it's in the heart. He's looking straight at the heart from which the mouth flows. I think sometimes also, I'd like to pitch this out here. This is food for thought. I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about this, but I wonder, because there are times in the scriptures that said that he knew that he would call them out of their questions in their mind. Why do you question me in your hearts? I wonder if it wouldn't go better if it didn't just come out of the heart and out of the mouth. The honesty of going, I'm struggling with this. Nicodemus, how can a person crawl back into their mother's womb? He could have just thought that in his heart, but he asked the question, and you know what? He got the answer.
He did. Have there been times in your ministry when things that are impossible for man have been made possible by God? And tell us about them.
Oh my goodness. You live a whole life of that, especially serving, because you know that called to do what we do, and it's not just those of us who are in some kind of vocational ministry, because all of us are called to be servants. All of us are called to be equipped by the scriptures, and that the whole idea is that we're called to do something we cannot do in our natural man. And so we're up against that constantly, that God has called us to do something we actually cannot do on our own. He has to come do it through us. But one of the things that I have found baffling along the way, a lot of the time I am comfortable knowing that this is the way it's going to go down. But still, sometimes I feel like God might have missed a great opportunity to make something easier than it was. Because it was just like, Lord, this might have been one of those times that we could have just done this pretty easily. But one of the things that I have found is that I am very rarely at my best. You know how you want to be, something comes up and it is important for whatever reason, a profound opportunity to serve or something. whether you're writing, whether you're really needing to come through for a friend, whatever it may be in life, really want to be such a great parent, for instance, really want to come through with a project at work. It could be 1,000 different opportunities when you really think, oh God, help me to feel great, help me to be well rested, and you'll come right up against it, and none of those things, all of those things that you thought, Lord, I would be so much better for your glory.
Right.
If all of this could go well, and all of this could, and yet what I find myself so often is that in my weakness, He showed His strength.
Yeah.
And I think that as much as anything, yes, Lauren, yes. The whole thing, the one thing I can tell you looking back over my shoulder at 30 plus years of very active ministry is that it was all impossible. It truly was. I have written things, and I know that you can say this, I have been in writing projects that I thought, this thing is not going to finish.
Yeah.
Because there comes a crisis right in the middle of it. This thing, we're not going to get finished with this thing. This is going to be the one. This is going to be the one. And somehow there it ends up on a shelf, and I think, God, you did
Only
it.
you. Yeah.
Only you.
It's such a joy to have you this time around on this quest here in my very own yard. We're just down from my house a little bit in these humble woods just outside Houston, Texas, and this property represents a whole new life to Keith and I. After 27 years in Houston, Texas, in the middle of all the traffic, we decided one day to pack it up and move to the woods. This has been our quest, and I walk these woods every single day, and usually with a pair of dogs. You're about 10 days into our quest by now, and hopefully you've gotten the hang of the inquiry, of coming to the page of Scripture and seeing God bring up questions that He already knows the answer to, so that we will come into a place of disclosure to Him, searching us out. I love the fact that our God searches us, even though He already knows what He's going to find, and He has made us searchers. I want to remind you of a place in Scripture in John chapter 6, very familiar if you have a background in the Scriptures, and if you don't, I'm going to tell you the story. It's Jesus and His disciples, and they are out on the side of the Sea of Galilee, and a large crowd had followed them because they had seen all the signs and wonders and healings that Jesus had performed. And all of them were gathered together, and Jesus did a very interesting thing. I don't know if you're like me, almost every single day I bring Jesus some kind of problem that I have. But right here in this text, Jesus brings them a problem. And He says to Philip, how are we supposed to feed all of these people? And Philip looks at the crowd, and I'm paraphrasing when I say that he says, listen, we could pull all our money together and they couldn't even have a bite. But Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, says, well, there's this one boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. I mean, but what is that to so many? Jesus says, have them all sit down, and they do. And He has them bring Him everything they've got, every single crumb, just 5 barley loaves, 2 fish. And He takes it, and He blesses it, and He breaks it, and He distributes it through the crowd, and everyone eats until they're full. 5,000 people, and they gather up all the leftovers in baskets. I want you to just try to go through this with me, that Jesus tells us sometimes this is the problem, to see if we're going to think through the solution that would take a miracle of Christ to perform. That's exactly what He does to them, because it says in the text that after He asked the question, it says He asked them because He was going to test them. What was He testing them to see? He was going to see, would you figure me in to your equation? When it comes to the sum of what's going to happen here, do you see the math just where you're concerned, or do you see it with what I can do with it? Bring me what you've got, and see what I will multiply. We see it over and over again in Scripture. One place that I absolutely love is way back in Exodus chapter 4. Moses is at his wit's end because God has called him for such a task to go back to Egypt to call forth the people of God out of that land of slavery, insists that the Pharaoh let them go, and Moses is to lead them out in that wilderness to their freedom. Only Moses does not feel like he's qualified to do it. And so in all the arguing back and forth, I don't have what it takes, I don't have what it takes, God says to him in the very opening of Exodus chapter 4, what is that in your hand? And of course, it was a staff. And he says, pitch it on the ground. He pitches it on the ground, it becomes a serpent. He picks it back up and it becomes a staff again. What is in your hand? What do you have to bring? I love this stick. This stick goes with me on so many walks. Keith and I found it the very first year we lived out in these woods, way down by a creek. We especially loved it because it has been eaten clean by a couple of different beavers who took what would have been the little trunk, slender trunk to a tree, and they would have gnawed the thing until it looks like it has been polished. And we would take it and we would go through the leaves with it. We would knock down spider webs with it. I would walk with it as a walking stick. But one day I came upon a poisonous snake, a copperhead, and I looked at that snake and I started to run back to get Keith to do something with that snake, only I knew the second I let my eyes go away from that snake, it would be gone and there would be no way to go back after it. And there was just that sense of, what is that in your hand? And this became my snake stick. To date, I have no idea how many poisonous snakes I have killed with this one stick. What do you have in your hands? Let me tell you something. After 30 years of very active ministry, over and over again, I felt the frustration of saying, Lord, why is it I'm never really in perfect condition to serve? Has anybody else ever felt that way besides me? Where you think, it looks like, Lord, that you would want my very best, so I'd be in the very best condition to do it. But so often, whatever the circumstances may be, my heart would be burdened, or I'd have all sorts of travel drama, or some kind of crisis at home, whatever it might be. Maybe I was physically ill, continually in the situation to say, Lord, I'm not at my best. What am I to do here? Over and over again, bring me what you have. Bring me all you have. Withhold nothing from me, and I will work a wonder with you. At the end of the day, you know why? Because it's His glory. At the end of the day, it's all His credit. At the end of a life, at the end of a serving ministry of any kind, doing whatever God has called you to do, we get to the end of it and know that all we did was show up, give Him what little we had, and He performed a miracle with it. What is in your hand? What skill has He given you? What experience do you have behind you? What do you have to bring? I know how you feel. It can't possibly be enough. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to be all you've got. And there, the miracle takes place. Stay with Him. He's going to be so faithful to you.